Okay. Today is May 13th, 2006. I am interviewing Peter Kraft. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Linton, North Dakota. Could you please state your full name?
Peter A. Kraft,
And when were you born?
May 17th, 1917,
And where at?
at Strasburg, North Dakota.
Did you ever hear any stories about your birth?
No, except that I was born in a home with the help of a midwife.
Was the midwife a neighbor or somebody that went around?
I imagine it was probably a neighbor.
Okay. Can you share with us your earliest memory that you have?
My earliest memory that I have?
Yeah, the one longest ago that you can remember.
Probably when my father's elevator burned down in Strasburg. He ran the Kraft elevator. That was 1924.
How did it start on fire? Do you know?
I was too young to remember. I don't know how but it burned down. He didn't rebuild it because there were other elevators there. Too much competition. So he bought a half section of land west of Strasburg, just across the river from Fort Yates, and we moved to that farm then.
What was it like growing up on the plains?
Oh, there was no television. There were a few radios, but then the batteries were usually dead, so we didn't have a radio anyway. So we played cards in the evenings. Winter time we made homemade ice cream.
Was it hand crank ice cream?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Always a workout to crank that thing around. What did you enjoy the most about growing up on the plains?
Probably my friends on the farm, neighbors, and school kids.
Did you and the neighbor kids get together a lot?
Yes, we did. Pretty every day we were together.
What would you guys do? What would be a typical play game that you
guys would do? Well, in the summertime we'd probably play crickets or shoot marbles, play a little baseball. Okay. And that was pretty well the way we entertained ourselves.
Okay. And the way you play cricket, is it similar to how cricket is played now?
It's way different.
How did you play it?
We had a stick and made a little hole in the ground, put a little stick over that, shot it out with a stick, and then we measured how many feet we had that thing out there and see who was the winner. Basically, that's the way it was.
Okay, there wasn't any running around?
No.
Okay. What did you find unpleasant about growing up on the plains?
Unpleasant, I would say, not having any of the convenience like inside plumbing and electric lights. We had kerosene lamps and outside toilets, and it wasn't too good.
Cold weather. What were the winters like what was a typical winter like?
Most of our winters as I grew up were pretty cold. Lots of snow. From about Thanksgiving Day on, the Model T was put on blocks. We didn't drive that anymore. We used a sleigh or bobsled. That was our way of getting around in the winter time. And since we lived across from Fort Yates, only a few miles, Fort Yates was our shopping town. We went there to church. We went there to programs, to dances. Had a great time at Fort Yates. And if I may say a little about the priest there, Father Bernard Strassmeyer. He was a saintly priest, and whenever we go there, in wintertime, of course, we cross on the ice, he preached 3 sermons, one in English, one in German for us Germans, and one in the Indian language. The same priest, going back a little earlier, had Indian enemies, but he had a few friends. So one time, they were out to kill him. He had one good family, Indian friend. So he went to their house. He lay in bed in between the man and wife, had himself completely covered. When the Indians came to kill him, they said, "Is Father Bernard here?" "No, he's not here." So they left. One other occasion, they were after him, so he went to the river. It was the spring in the springtime. The river was just breaking up. There were nothing but ice blocks on the river. So he jumped from one ice block to the other, all the way to this side, came to Linton, had Mass in our Methodist church. There was no Catholic church at that time. So he had Mass in the Methodist Church here. So he's a saintly man. And later on, another time, an Indian came. Well, actually, there were nuns. 2 nuns had a parochial school there, and they also did his laundry. One time in the wintertime, one of the nuns says, "Father, where is your winter underwear? It's not in the laundry." "Oh, a poor Indian came here the other day. He was almost froze to death. So I took it off, gave it to him, and he put it on. So I have no winter underwear now." That's the kind of man he was. Later on, he went to, I believe it's Kendall, South Dakota. That's where he died. I'm sure he's a saint. If he isn't in heaven, then there is no heaven.
Why were the Native Americans out to kill him?
That was quite a few years ago. They just didn't like the white people.
Okay, it wasn't necessarily him personally. It was just
Just that he was a white man, and
okay.
even though he ministered to them, but there were still some enemies.
Interesting. Very interesting. Let's kind of switch gears a little and talk about your family. Can you tell me about your grandparents first, on your mother's side?
Yes, on the mother's side, my mother came to the United States, probably 10 or 12 years old. Her older sister was already here, so she worked with her. And another brother, the older one, brother John Schmalz, Uncle John Schmalz, he started the Schmalz Meats in Strasbourg in 1910. Eventually moved to Linton and run the Schmalz Meats here in Linton until he died. Well, anyway, he came to the United States. 3 brothers didn't come. So 2 of them, Uncle Martin and Uncle Ludwig, they shipped them into Siberia at hard labor for the rest of their lives. They never saw their family again. They had wives and children. There was no welfare. The younger brother, Uncle Leo Schmalz, he put up a fight when they wanted to take him away. And he had a job, something like our courthouse here, maybe county treasurer or county auditor or something. So they dragged him out of his office, out in the street, shot him dead right out in the street. He also had a wife and few children. They had to see how they get along. My grandmother, we always sent money to them before the Bolsheviks took over. With the $10 she could buy flour, coffee, sugar, lard. For the whole relationship, for a whole month it lasted. Towards the last, the Bolsheviks wouldn't give her the money anymore. So at 85, she starved to death. There was no casket available, no priest was allowed. So they buried the poor woman like you'd bury a dog in the ground, 85 years old. And she was a nice Catholic lady. That's the way she had to leave this earth. There too, if she is in heaven, then there is no heaven.
Why did they send the 2 brothers to Siberia?
They did that to so many people. If they suspected them of being against the government, they loaded them up and took them to Siberia, and that's where they stayed the rest of their lives.
Okay. What about on your grandfather's, or on your father's side?
On my father's side, he was also born in Russia, same as my mother. He came over here, and first they came as far as Eureka, that's where the railroad ended, and then by a covered wagon and so on, the relatives here would come and pick him up. Now, how they got in touch with him, I don't know. They came overseas, and through some kind of letter writing, I guess they managed to meet him at Eureka and bring him up here. My father had 17, excuse me, brothers and sisters, but through a second marriage, there were 18 in that family. And they were all, all in that Strasbourg area.
Did you have a lot of contact with any of your grandparents that came over? Or any of those relatives?
Not too much, but I did get in touch with my Uncle Ludwig's daughter. She's now in Osnabrück, Germany. And she and I wrote letters back and forth. Until about a year ago, I haven't heard from her anymore. So I think she probably either died or was in a nursing home or something. So I lost all touch with them now.
What about your aunts and uncles? Did you keep in touch? Did you grow up seeing your aunts and uncles and cousins a lot?
Oh yes, especially on my dad's side. And of course, my mother's side, there was another sister. 2 of her sisters came over here from Russia with her. So we'd be in touch with them. My uncles on my dad's side, most of them lived around the Strasbourg area, so we were in touch with them quite a bit.
Do you have a lot of family get-togethers?
Not as such, but never had a reunion, no.
Okay.
But it's just a visit individually every once in a while.
Okay. Did you have a favorite aunt or uncle while growing up as a kid?
Oh yes, Uncle Peter. He was my favorite. He made me, every time he came to our house to visit, I had to make the Botzel book. That's sort of going on your head and turning yourself over. Then I get a nickel or a dime from him. And that time, the nickels and dimes was a lot of money. Uncle Peter, yeah, he was my favorite.
How often would you see him?
Probably once a month. I was also looking forward to that nickel or dime that he had for me. That bought me an ice cream cone or a candy bar or something like that.
That's fun. What about your cousins?
They were just like ordinary friends would be. We'd visit each other once in a while.
Okay. Did you have a favorite cousin?
Not really. They were all about the same to me.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your father. Can you describe your father? What kind of his character, what kind of a man he was?
Well, he was a school teacher to begin with when he came over from here. It didn't take much to be a school teacher at that time, you know. And then he started that business of running an elevator. And physically he was a big, strong man, had a big stomach. And he was a pretty smart man. He was on the school board out in the country, and there was a church trustee, things of that nature.
Okay. When and where was he born?
In Russia.
In what year?
That I don't know. Probably 1885, somewhere in there.
And what was his first name?
Adam.
Okay. How did your father express his emotions? How do you express when his love or when he was upset?
He was a great father. He took care of his family. He'd have his tempers like everybody else occasionally, especially on the farms. Many things would go wrong, and he didn't like that too well. But generally, he was a pretty good man. Taught us the right things and so on.
And if you did something that made him happy, how would he show you that?
Well, he'd probably reward us with a nickel or a dime. That was always the big thing. We got a nickel or a dime if we did something happy for him.
Okay. And if you and your siblings were misbehaving, acting up like kids do?
He had the razor strap, like a lot of those old timers, and we'd get...
What's a razor strap?
Well, there was a single, without, not like we have now, a straight edge you call it. Just go straight down. And then they had this strap that run it back and forth, that sharpened it, and then he could shave with that. Well, anyway, that's the razor strap. It was like a belt. We get a few whops of them, and then we behaved after that.
Okay. Can you describe your personal relationship with your dad?
It was pretty good. And I was, since there were 5 boys and a little sister in the family, my mother said I had to be the maid in the house. So I helped with the cooking, laundry, and so on. I didn't learn anything about farm work, so when I graduated from the 8th grade, Dad said, we'll have to send him to high school. He can't farm, so he gets an education. So he sent me to Strasbourg at first. And, of course, we were very poor. There was no spending money. I had 2 pair of trousers, 3 shirts, a Sunday suit, and a heavy coat, and 1 pair of shoes. The shoes wore out. There was no money to get them sold, so I had to go barefooted. Those are really hard times. That was in the 1932s when that started. And at that time, there was the farmer got 22 cents a bushel for his wheat. If he had good wheat, he probably got 25 cents a bushel. Beer was a nickel a glass. Eggs were 4 cents a dozen. Cream, if you had a good can of cream, 10 gallons, he probably got $4 for that. Coffee was 15 cents a pound. That's the way it went. It was real cheap.
And beer was a nickel, even
a nickel a glass,
you
right?
Were in the 30s when.
When it came out in 32 or 33. Yeah.
Okay. What is your fondest memory of your dad, of the time you guys had?
Golly, I really don't know anything in particular. He was just always there for me whenever I needed him. He was there, as he was for the rest of my brothers and my sister.
Okay.
He was a good father.
He was easy
Good.
to talk to?
Easy to talk to, good provider, pretty good manager. He managed the farm real nicely.
And what about your mother?
You couldn't find a more saintly woman than her. There again, if she isn't in heaven, there is no heaven. She was just a great, great mother. We loved her. All the neighbors loved her. All the relatives, they thought she was just the best.
How did she express her emotions? Did she express them more than your dad?
She never got mad. You couldn't get her angry. She was just the most patient woman in the world. The kids and the neighbors, everybody said that. She was just so patient and very, very beautiful lady.
And what all did she do to help out your dad and to help out on the farm?
She helped mostly with, not out in the field, but around taking care of the chickens, gathering the eggs, and see that the clocks sat on the eggs to hatch, and things of that nature she provided. And she did all the laundry by hand. There was no machine. I helped her. Sometimes the blood could run from my finger knuckles from rubbing on that scrub board. But that's the way things were.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite meal that she would make? Or one of
Definitely, we call them cut noodles. Egg noodles.
Okay.
Schnittener Nudle, we'd call it with German. That was definitely my favorite, and it's still my favorite to this day. I just love that pasta.
What about a dessert?
Dessert, there was no money to have pies or cakes or anything, so we hardly ever had desserts. Maybe at Christmas time or Easter or something like that, she might bake a cake. Other than that, there was no money for any of those things.
Okay. How did she cope during the hard times of the 30s or when the elevator burned down?
How did she cook?
Cope. How'd she handle it?
Well, she had all of us kids, and she did the best she could. She was a hard worker, very sincere, honest.
Do you know when both your parents died and where?
My dad died in 1935 at age 54. He got pneumonia. At that time, there were no sulfur drugs, no penicillin, so he had to die. He was 54 years old. My mother died in 1965, and she was 85 years old. So she lived to be a pretty ripe age.
Did she stay in Linton or Strasbourg?
She was in Linton until shortly before she passed away. She entered the Strasbourg nursing home for a few months.
Okay. Can you tell me the order of all your brothers and sisters, their names, when they were born, if you know?
Not really, except Anton was the oldest. He was born, I believe, in 1903. Then there was John. We were about every 2 years one was born. John, then Lawrence, then Alois, then myself, Peter, then William, then Anna Mary, my sister's the youngest in the family.
Okay. Who was stricter with kids, any of you guys that would act up? Was your father strict?
Oh, definitely the father. Mother, she didn't have the nerve to hurt any of us, but father, he was a little more strict. He was firm, but very, very honest about it.
Do you think one of them influenced you more than the other, your mom or your dad?
Probably my mother, because she says that Peter has to get an education. Because he can't do any farming, we have to get him educated. So she was.
Do you know how your parents met?
Not exactly, but when mother came over from Russia, she got a job here in Linton with the Petries. They ran this big Petrie store, W.E. Petrie store. They were real nice people. So she worked with them. And my dad was in the Strasbourg area working with his family. Somehow or other they got together in church, I believe. Then eventually got married.
Let's talk about your brothers and sisters. How did you guys get along with each other?
Quite well, I would say. We had our little scrabbles just like everybody else, but generally speaking, we got along real good.
Was there any competition between any of the children?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
Okay. No fighting over certain chores?
No, no.
Okay. Was there a brother or sister that you were closest to?
Probably my youngest brother, Bill. He and I were always close until he died a couple of years ago. Okay. Even when we were in the service both in the Philippine Islands, we met on one occasion over there. And I became his best man when he got married. You want to know a little about the Philippines?
Sure.
Then I was stationed in Mariveles, Bataan, Philippine Islands, across the bay from Manila. And the war was already over with then, but that's Mariveles is where the famous death march started. That was over with when I got there, but I did see thousands of graves there, poor guys that were tortured by the Japs and killed. And we adopted a little fella, sort of adopted him into our company. Jake was his name, was 8 years old. So I asked him one day, Jake, how'd you get away from the Japs? He said, oh, I hid in the bushes. But I saw where the Japs took the babies from the mother's arms, threw it in the air, rammed that bayonet through him. The baby screamed and blood all over. Then they tossed it back to the mother. They saw that a lot of times, he says. But he got away because he hid in the bushes. What a thing to experience by those barbaric people.
Yeah. What year was this about?
That was well, I got over there I was shipped overseas in 1945. I got discharged in 46. But this happened before 1945.
Okay. Wow. Interesting thing to see. What other kind of activities did you do for fun besides cricket and baseball?
That's good. Really not, like I say, there was no radio, no TV, no electric lights, no inside plumbing. The most pleasure we had was the winter time when there was snow. We could make homemade ice cream and cake. That was our big deal in the winter time. In the summertime was mostly chores. There was plenty of work to do. We were tired by evening. We were glad to get to bed.
During the winter, if there was a blizzard and you were snowed inside, what did you and your siblings do to entertain yourself?
That again was the card playing. That was the main thing, playing cards.
What kind of cards?
Well, we had whist and profrons and duregels and all those different names they had for games. Okay. That was about the only entertainment we had. Yeah.
Did your parents teach you how to play the card game?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You said that the neighborhood kids would get together and play. Was there a certain house or a certain place you guys would get together?
We usually had, on Sundays mostly we got together and we decide, today we're at my place. Next Sunday we're going to John's place. The next day it'd be to Felix's place and so on. We'd switch around so we'd all be at the same place at all the time. And that usually a dozen or maybe 15 of us got together. And we just had a nice time just visiting and moving around.
Was there a favorite house to visit?
Yeah, that was the one that we liked. They had a nice big home there. It was a Joseph Gloss farmhouse. That was a big home. Okay. That's where we preferred to go.
Could you play baseball there and cricket?
Yeah, anything we wanted, yeah.
Okay. Did you have a favorite, I'm sorry, I asked that one. Did you ever go hunting as a child?
I didn't, but all my brothers hunted. So we had plenty of pheasants to eat and prairie chickens and rabbits and all that stuff.
Did they ever have any interesting times hunting?
Well, at that time the game wardens weren't that strict. If they felt like shooting a deer out there, we shot a deer. When they felt like shooting a pheasant, the whole year round we had pheasant meat and so on. There were no game wardens around. We thought nothing of it.
Did you ever go fishing?
Yeah, I went fishing in the Missouri River and in the Cattail Creek there. The Missouri River got the walleyes and catfish, and the Cattail Creek was just some little bullheads and other whitefish. But it was fun. We go out there, we'd come home with 25, 30 every afternoon when we'd fish when we had time.
If you went fishing, was it with your family or was it with your friends?
Just with our friends. We ourselves would go fishing. One time I might mention by this Cattail Creek, there was about 1.5 miles from our home. We drove there with our Model T, my brother John, Eloise, Bill, and I. We fished in this creek, and right next to the creek was sort of like a cliff, you might say. On the top of that were 2 bulls. They were starting to scratch. My brother says, when they scratch, they're after you. So we jumped across the street and ran towards our car, which was about 1/2 mile away. Those 2 bulls and about 150 cows all followed us. We ran like scared jackrabbits. And my brothers got through the fence okay, and I got stuck. I says to my brother, ich hang, meaning I'm hanging here. He says, reiß, tear. So I reiced, I tore. My pants were hanging on the fence. I was there with my bare butt, crawled into the Model T, and all those 150 cows and bulls were there. They would have killed us if we wouldn't got away from them. So I had nightmares for about a year after that. Every night I dreamt about that. That was really scary.
Did your farm have cows on it? Did you have any?
Oh yeah, yeah.
How were you around those? Were you able to?
Ours were milk cows and tame cows. This was out in the pasture where they were all wild cows. There were about 150 of them.
Okay. Did you have any other stories of your friends playing? Anything happen when you were playing baseball?
No, we'd get into little fights once in a while. Everybody wanted to win, naturally. Other than that, we got along pretty good.
Did you have any superstitions as a child growing up? Or any
Not really, except I was very scared of the dark. Very scared of the dark. I never went outside alone or anything like that. Of course, finally I got over that.
Did you have a favorite song as a child? Or a favorite rhyme?
Probably The Poor Babes in the Woods. My dear, do you know, and so on. Have you ever heard that?
No. Could you tell us the lyrics or even?
I can probably even sing it yet. My dear, do you know what a long time ago 2 poor little children whose names I don't know were stolen away on a fine summer's day and left in the woods, as I've heard people say. And when it was night, so sad was their plight, the sun it went down, and the moon gave no light. They sobbed and they sighed, and they bitterly cried, poor babes in the woods, poor babes in the woods. That was my favorite.
Did you learn that? Did your mom teach you that? Or did you learn that at
No, in school. We learned that in school.
Okay. Let's talk about school for a little bit.
Well, it was a country school. In fact, I taught some of those country schools for 8 years. Had anywhere from, well, up to as high as 30 kids, all 8 grades. And most of the time I taught about 5 miles from home. And I walked to school every morning, walked home in the evening. I was my own janitor, had to keep the stove going, keep the school clean. Got $45 a month to start out with. That was it, $45 a month.
What was that like during that time? Was that enough to live on? Was it?
Well, oh yeah, you could buy your Model T, you load the back of the Model T up with cornflakes and what have you for about $4 or $5. Okay. So the money went quite a long ways. But anyway, I taught there for them schools for 8 years, and then I went into the Army got me then for 3.5 years.
You got drafted.
Yeah. Okay. And then when I got out of the Army, I went to a mortuary science school in Milwaukee, got my mortuary science degree, and became an embalmer and funeral director for 33 years. I ran a funeral home then. My college I got at Minot State University. That's where I graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in education. And it was rough teaching, all 8 grades, 30 kids. And especially beginning with no experience, just right out of high school and right into teaching. It was hard.
Did you want to become a teacher or a
That was my original deal. That's how I went to Minot. At that time, it was Minot State Teachers College. That's how I went to Minot. Then later on decided, then when I was in service and handled debt, GIs, it gave me the idea, well, if I can handle dead people here, I can handle them in civilian life too. It gave me the idea of becoming an embalmer and funeral director.
Okay. Where did you go to grade school at?
My very first grade was in Strasbourg, St. Benedict's grade school. I didn't know a word of English when I got into school. We always talked German at home. How I ever got into the English, I don't remember. We weren't allowed to speak German on the school ground. So gradually I learned English. And then after that we moved to the farm, 21 miles west of Strasbourg. My other 7 years were out there. And we had only 7-month terms. There were no 9-month terms. So when I started high school, it was hard for me because a lot of those kids in town, they had also had 9 months. So many things came up, I knew absolutely nothing about it. So it was hard for me to go to high school.
They have 7 months because it was a country school?
Country school, and because of not enough tax dollars, I guess, all those years was only 7-month terms. Of course, we kids were glad when it let out at 7 months. But in the long run, it hurt me.
Did they make the 7 months so it fit around harvest? So you would be.
It started in September and ended after 7 months, yeah.
Okay, and you did the harvest in September
Right.
then?
And a lot of times the older kids, they had to stay out of school in the fall and then in the spring again to help with the farm work.
Okay. How large was the school that you went to for 7 years? How many kids were in it?
Anywhere from 20 to 30.
Okay.
20 to 30 in all 8 grades.
Were they really strict about not speaking German?
Oh yeah, you had to speak English on the school grounds.
If you were caught speaking German, what would happen?
And then you wrote on the blackboard maybe 100 times, I will not speak German on the playground anymore. That was our punishment. So we were pretty sure that we spoke English.
Did that ever happen to you?
Not to me, but to some of my buddies, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Then in high school, when I went to high school, we had a superintendent, Ben Gustafson was his name. He was strict. Whenever somebody didn't behave, he took him in his office and he had a rubber hose about 2 feet long. And he whacked that off their butt several times. He wasn't a bit afraid to do that. It didn't happen to me, but to a few of the guys. Mm-hmm. And they behaved pretty good in high school then.
Did you have a favorite teacher in grade school?
Yes, I would say she was our neighbor lady. Ellen Bader was her name. She taught the school out in the country for several years. She also was a farm lady. And then she was 5 miles from our school, so she went on horseback to the school, except when the roads were okay. She had what we call a runabout, Model T Ford. She drove with that, but otherwise she'd ride there. She was a very, very good teacher. We just loved her.
And she taught
all the 8 grades, yeah.
What would you guys do on recess when you had a break?
We'd play tag and play baseball and hide and go seek. Ball over the barn there, throw a ball over and see who catch it and run around, tag the guys on the other side, and stuff like that.
You had to bring your own lunch to school.
Yeah.
What did you bring it in and what?
The good old gallon syrup bucket. You know, we bought syrup by the gallons. And that gallon thing that took the lunch for all of us, for the whole family that went to school. It was usually syrup sandwiches. If we were lucky enough, had pickles maybe. And at Christmas time, we'd have an apple. That was about it. Never had any fruit the whole year round.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I say history and English. I liked that the best.
And which one didn't you like?
I hated arithmetic and math. Hated it. In fact, I didn't even pass it my first year when I was in the 8th grade. So I had to take it over the next year again to pass it.
Overall, were you a good student?
I would say so. In fact, Superintendent Gustafson here in the Linton High School said one time, Peter Kraft is my most faithful student I have. He is the best. That made me feel very good. So he had a lot of faith in me, I guess. And he told my papers up once in a while, look how neat Peter Kraft has everything written. Why can't the rest of you do it? I was a perfectionist, you know.
What kind of values did your teachers teach you?
Mainly to be honest and be fair. I think that was the main thing. They were all nice teachers.
Did you have a lot of homework?
Not much, not too much, and we were glad we didn't.
If you had homework, what would it be?
Just like in my case, maybe arithmetic and maybe history and geography, whatever you took up.
Did your older brothers and sisters ever help you with your homework?
They did if I needed help, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you read books at home?
Not much. In the country school, we had no libraries. Well, there were a few books in the library, but none to take home and read.
Did you adapt to speaking English pretty well? Or was it hard?
I think, but like I say, I don't remember just how I got into it finally, but gradually I got into it and had no more problem after that.
Let's talk about chores. What kind of chores did you have to do as a child?
Mostly, being that I was a mother's helper, I had to gather the eggs and bring in the cow chips for the stove. That made good fuel. And some wood we had. I don't know what else. Well, of course, I had to milk. It was during the busy season. My brothers were all out in the harvest field. I had to do the milking alone. I milked as high as 17 cows at one time by hand. Take the milk in, run it through the separator by hand again, feed the calves. That was my main chore, especially during the summertime. Then the wintertime was bringing in the kindling wood for the stove. We always burned wood because we were close to the river. We didn't buy coal.
Did you ever help in the family garden? Or did you?
Oh yes, yeah. We had a nice garden every year. We watered it by carrying water by pail to water whatever needed water.
What would you typically plant in your garden?
A little of everything. Carrots, onions, radishes, lettuce, everything else that they grow right around here.
Okay. And what did your family harvest on the farm?
It was mainly wheat.
Okay.
But that was our main harvest, yeah. Some flax, but mostly wheat and corn.
Did your father help out with household tasks?
Not the house. He was busy outside managing the farm and helping the rest of the boys bring in the harvest and so on.
So did mainly the older boys helped out on the farm,
Right,
and
yeah.
the younger kids helped at
In the house. That was mainly me because I was my mother's maid.
Okay. What would be your most favorite chore, and what chore did you hate?
Oh, the most favorite one was gathering the eggs. It was nice to bring in a bucket full of eggs all the time. And the most hated one was probably milking the cows, because some of them would kick, and it just wasn't any fun.
Did you or any of your brothers and sisters ever get hired out to the neighbors?
Yes, a couple of them did. They'd probably get $1 a day or whatever during the spring work and harvest time.
Okay. The neighbor would just come and they'd help with harvesting?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Can you describe the house that you grew up in?
Yes, when we moved out to the farm, at first we had just a barn and a lean-to. That lean-to on the barn was our residence, our living. We had a solid bed. All of us, 6 brothers and my sisters, slept on this one bed. And then that summer, we built a log house, a fairly big log house. That was our living then. And then for our chicken coop, that was a log house. Our granary was a log house. The smokehouse was a log house. The kitchen, summer kitchen, was a log house because we were close to the river, get the logs for free, or maybe for a couple of dollars. So we had a lot of log buildings on our farm. They're all gone now. Everything's gone. And it's potatoes are being raised in that area now.
Can you describe the other furniture in the house besides the bed?
There was nothing but just a homemade table, chairs, and that's a dresser, one dresser. That was about it.
How did your family keep the house warm in the winter?
With a pot-bellied stove. In our case, it was mostly wood because we lived near the river where there was a lot of wood, so we were no cold. That's the way we heated it.
How did you stay cool in the summer?
We didn't. Yeah, there was no such thing as air conditioning or electric fan or anything.
Okay. How often did your family have guests over? For dinner or for just the afternoon?
Well, as such, you didn't. They just had to come to visit, and okay, you stay for dinner, or you stay for supper when they came and visit. But as far as inviting them, that hardly ever happened where anybody was invited.
Okay. What would it be like if somebody showed up? Did they just come to?
They just come out unannounced, just to visit, mostly neighbors and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you allowed to speak English at home?
Oh yeah, if we wanted to, yeah.
Did
But
you?
we just spoke the German all the time.
Okay. Can you describe the bath? Or did you always have an outdoor bathroom?
Always outside, always outside.
Okay. How often were you supposed to do things like brush your teeth?
There was no such thing as brushing teeth at that time, no.
For taking a bath, how often?
Just a sponge bath, wash basin, and a wash rag. We'd clean ourselves that. Of course, the summertime we go to the Cattail Creek or the river and take our swims. But the wintertime was with the basin and a wash rag. That was it.
And how often typically would you?
Well, Mother insisted that at least once a week, every Saturday, so before church, we had to clean ourselves up as best we could with what little we had.
Okay. And did the water, was it usually the same water for all the
Yeah,
children?
yeah.
So by the time...
It was in a wash tub a lot of times, so we'd all go in the same wash tub and take our bath in there.
So was it cold since you were the younger one? Was it getting cold by the time you got in there?
Usually, yeah.
Okay. What was a typical meal like that your mom would prepare for you?
Like I said earlier, well, a lot of those cup noodles on it, but the ordinary baking powder noodles, we had them for every day. That was a cheap meal because we were a poor family, and we all kind of liked it. For every day, we'd get the baking powder noodles, and when she baked bread, we'd have the dumpf noodles, the steam noodles or whatever you want to call it. With that bread dough, she'd make those bigger noodles, and they were real good. So those are our favorites, and we had lots and lots of them.
And did you usually have like pheasant meat to go with it for dinner?
Yeah, pheasant meat. In the wintertime, of course, we did our butchering. We had sausage and pork meat and so on, beef.
Okay. How did your mom keep the food cool during the summer?
We had right by our well, we dug a deep hole right next to the well, and when the water was being pumped, that let off quite a bit of coolness. So our cream and milk we set right next to that, and other than that, you couldn't keep it any longer than a day. It would get sour and spoil. And the summertime, because we had no meat, we couldn't, except some meat that we had canned.
Okay. How did your family have the meals? Did you all sit down together? Were there assigned seats?
All sit together, no assigned seats, but all sat together.
Okay. Were you allowed to talk?
Yeah, we were allowed to talk.
Okay. What was your least favorite meal?
Anything that had green peppers. To this day, I hate green peppers. Other than that, I can eat everything, like everything, but anything with green peppers in it, I just don't like it for some reason or other.
You said that your family would make ice cream a lot. Can you tell me how you made the ice cream?
Well, we had our regular ice cream recipe, eggs, and cream, and of quite a bit of cream and milk and sugar. And in the syrup pail, and then had some kind of outside bucket, we filled that with ice, put the syrup pail in the middle, then turn it by hand. Put salt around the outside ice because that made it nice and cooled. So it usually take maybe half hour, 45 minutes till we had that turned and frozen, and then we'd eat it.
Did you have a paddle in the ice cream that turned, or did you turn the?
We just turned it by hand. We just took that, turned it by hand, back and forth, back and forth.
Okay. You said your mom did make her own sausage. Did you guys do any of your own butchering?
Yeah, we did a lot of our own butchering. Then the neighbors always came in and helped because we used to butcher about 4 or 5 hogs at a time, and they were heavy. They took a lot of lifting. They'd scald them and clean them that way and hang them up and gut them. And then the neighbors, they would help with the sausage and the head cheese and all of that. So the winter time, it was an all-day affair, yeah. They had a good time doing it. They had their red eye along with it, those older timers. They had a shot of red eye every once in a while. And good sausage, good head cheese they made. So in the winter time we ate real good, but in the summertime it was pretty skimpy.
Did you kids help with the butchering?
Oh yeah, we all helped, yeah.
Okay, you guys didn't just go off and play?
Right. Then in the summertime, of course, when the spring chickens came along, then we had a lot of spring chickens and that kind of meat.
Okay. You said that your family had the red eye. What was your family's attitude towards alcohol?
That was a going thing. Every family had that. A neighbor come, you greet him by the door with a shot of red eye. Then once I said, hey, I forgot to taste this. Okay, fill it up again. He gave him a second shot. That happened a lot of times.
How often did people around you drink when you were growing up?
Mainly only at parties. Whenever there's a naming day party. The naming day party was a big deal. So you weren't invited, you know. If you didn't come, that was too bad for you. You just came without invitation. Birthdays meant nothing, but namesdays were big deals. That's when they had parties.
Can you tell me some more about the namesday celebration? What it is?
Well, it was like you'd ordinarily celebrate a birthday party, but like I say, uninvited. They came, and you better come or else you were in trouble. And the person that had the namesday, he was ready for him. He had the red eye ready, and if he was married, the wife had the kuchen and cake and all that sandwiches. Everything was ready for him. If the place was big enough, we'd probably have an accordion player come. There was a dance there. My dad played a button accordion, also played clarinet quite well. A neighbor of ours, Mr. Wingerter, he played the violin, so that was the music we had a lot of times. Which reminds me that when Lawrence Welk was still a boy, he and my dad were sort of halfway buddies. Lawrence played the accordion, my dad played the clarinet. So one night they played at a barn dance or a granary dance. The men had to pay 25 cents to get in. The women got in for free. By the end of the dance, each one made $4. Lawrence Welk had $4. My dad had $4. They were so happy. One of the best nights I ever had playing for a dance. So that was entertainment.
Did anybody else in your family play instruments or sing?
No, I played the violin in high school. And then in college I played the bass, drums, and so on. But other than that, nobody was musically inclined.
Okay. And what is a names day celebration?
Well, for example, the Catholics especially, my namesday is on St. Peter and Paul's Day. That's on June the 29th. That's my day to celebrate. St. Andrew's Day offhand, I remember, is November 30th. And this on your Catholic calendars, all those. You could always tell when the namesday was coming up. And that's a day, not the day we were born, just the name, the saint or whoever you were named after. I was named after St. Peter, so Peter had to celebrate.
Do you still celebrate your name's day?
Not anymore, except I might buy the boys some coffee downtown. I visit the coffee shops quite a bit or something like that. Other than that, it's not being celebrated.
Okay. Did your family make their own root beer, wine, or any other liquor?
Not my family didn't do much of that, but the neighbors all made root beer and regular beer. And that was good beer. But my dad had his own still, though. He made his own 190 proof. And that was quite a little contraption. we kids had to carry the cold water, or in the summertime that had to be kept cold all the time as it was being run through the machine. In the wintertime, of course, we put ice and snow in there. That kept it nice and cool. And you usually get about a gallon of good 190 proof alcohol out of it, and the other gallon was weaker stuff until it was all run through. And he made his own. He had a big barrel, 50-gallon barrel, put barley in it and sugar and yeast, and that had ferment for a couple of weeks. Then it was, he tested it, put a lit match in there. If the match went out, then knew now it was ready to run through the distillery. Then he distill it. So.
How did he distill it?
It was he had that made a boiler with a top over it, so nicely sealed, and another outfit that had the curling pipes, and the vapor of this alcohol went through those pipes and through to the side and into a jar, as it evaporated, as it condensed, we might say, through those pipes and into that thing. And after a gallon of that was out, that was the good stuff. The next gallon was weaker, and then it was all done.
Okay. And this was during the 1930s, during Prohibition?
Yeah.
Did anybody ever get in trouble for making
One time, my dad, we lived near Fort Yates, across the river from Fort Yates. It was my mother's namesake, St. Agnes. That was on January 21st. The revenue agents in Fort Yates got wind of it, that we had alcohol and were getting ready for a big celebration. So sure enough, the revenue men came that day of the namesake, put a pistol on my dad's side. Where's the liquor? And my older son saw them revenue agents coming, so they took the 2 gallons of red eye we had, threw them out the window, so they were smashed. They were outside. There was no evidence there. They took my dad into jail anyway, and then he was in jail for about a week, I guess. We had an attorney for Bismarck came, Scott Cameron was his name. He came down and finally freed him from that. But that night, the neighbors and all the people came to the namesake party. No whiskey. It was all gone. Sad story.
Did anybody, your family or any of the neighbors, view your dad as having done anything wrong for making the alcohol?
No, a lot of the neighbors have made it too, and everybody had their own alcohol. During the Prohibition days. They thought nothing of it.
Okay. I've always been curious about that. What types of clothes did you wear, and how were they made?
A lot of, if the mother of the house was a seamstress, especially the shirts and stuff like that, she'd making. The rest of the clothes, it was all bought in town. J.C. Penney was a good place to buy cheap overalls. Beretta was what we called, Beretta jacket, prairie jacket, and that was usually our dress stuff too. But we did have most of us had a Sunday suit, especially when we made First Holy Communion and so on. And that was our church suit. Other than that, it wasn't much for clothing.
Okay. Was there a lot of hand-me-downs in your family?
Oh yes, everything was hand-me-downs. Nothing was ever tossed.
Okay. How often did you get new clothes or change clothes?
Only the older ones would get new clothes, and then the rest of us got the hand-me-downs. That was a suit maybe every 5 or 6 years or something like that.
Okay. And shoes you wore until?
Till there were just nothing left of them anymore.
Okay. Do you remember your family getting electricity? Do you remember your house getting electricity?
They never did get it.
Never did get it?
Never did get it.
Okay. Do you remember the first car or truck when you first got that? Or did you
For a toy, you mean, or the real car?
The real car.
The real car, my dad got a 1926 Model T, I remember that real well. $400, a brand new Model T, and that was quite the car. And then later on he got an international truck, traded his car in because we didn't have money to run a car in a truck, so he traded that in with. Then the truck was our church-going vehicle, and when we took to town and so on, took the grain in there and everything. So that's what we had for several years then, just a truck on our farm.
Okay. Can you tell me how important the radio was to your family?
Radio was very important. But like I say, the batteries were pretty always dead. Eventually we got a wind charge out there to charge up the batteries. Then that went haywire. So we'd plug it in to take the car battery out. But there too, it didn't last very long. So most of the time we had no radio, but we loved radio as long as we did have it.
What was your favorite show?
Well, on the radio was the Carter family. I remember from Del Rio, Texas, I remember that. They were singers. And Sam and the City Fellas was an orchestra out of Bismarck called Sam and the City Fellas. They played old-time polkas and fast waltzes. We liked that. But too many times we just didn't have that radio. The batteries were dead.
I suppose. That's kind of a pain. Can you tell me how important religion was during your childhood?
That was a big, big factor. We had to go to church every Sunday. Now, where we lived out in the Winona, we had a mission church, and we had church only every other Sunday. But on the Sundays when we didn't have Mass, my dad and mother got us all around the table. We had to pray the rosary and the litany every Sunday before we got to go out and play. They all had to get, so we made sure that we were there all, not one here and one there and one other place. Get that rosary over with, that litany, and then we were done for that Sunday. But Mass was never missed on a Sunday.
And you were
Catholic,
right?
Yeah. And even to this day, I go to Mass every single day here in Linton. And I was a community ecumenical minister for 40 years and did the readings in church, but I just resigned it recently because I'm getting a little too old for that. But I still go to Mass every single morning and never miss it, of course, on Sundays.
What church or churches did your family attend? What were the names of them?
It was St. Bernard's. We called it Kotzenbach Church, we called it, where we lived. And the other church where my wife was at, that was out of the mission church, that was Holy Trinity out of Krosna, 10 miles southwest of Strasbourg. And our St. Bernard's, that was 20 miles west of Strasbourg. That was the mission church.
Okay, and was that the mission church that you had the priest that said Mass or said the homily in 3 languages?
No, that was, he came over from Fort Yates many years earlier.
Okay.
And had Mass at our Methodist church here in Linton then.
So at the mission church, was it always said in German?
Yeah, we always had it in German, yeah.
Okay.
In Krosna and in Winona, where I was at.
Okay. What were some religious activities that you participated in when you were growing up?
There were actually none as I grew up. But when I went to college, I was president of the Newman Club, and Father Arnie Spain was the vice president. He and I were buddies. And Arnie Spain, the priest, he became a priest later on. He just died here a few weeks ago, was buried in Bismarck. So he and I were in this Catholic Newman Club. That was about the only religious club there. And of course I was in the church choir in Minot all those 4 years, Catholic church choir. And in college I was in the a cappella concert choir. I played the bass drums. And I was president of what we called the Independent League. Instead of the fraternity like the Alpha Kappa Delta and so on, we formed an independent league. And I was president of that. That was all at Minot State Teachers College.
Okay. When you would go to church on Sunday, did you just go for Mass and leave, or? Did you
just for Mass and then leave, yeah. And out in the country too, I was also in that church choir. My dad and I were in the church choir. We both sang bass. Okay. And had that Mass over with, and that was it. Then there's nothing else going on.
You guys didn't stay around at church to socialize with the neighbors?
Well, maybe for a half an hour or so with different neighbors and so on, and then everybody had to go home to dinner. And before church, a lot of them came early, visited before church started. There was a lot of that going on at that time.
Okay. Would you say you were closer to your church community or the town that you lived near?
Well, the church was 6 miles from our farm. And Strasbourg was 21 miles east of there, and Linton was 26 miles northeast of our farm. And the church had a little grocery store there. The Coons operated that. So the more necessary things we could buy right there, which made it nice, like cereal and flour and coffee and so on.
Did your family celebrate your communion, your first reconciliation, your confirmation?
Well, that was always a big deal, yeah. There's a big dinner, and the relatives and neighbors came in for that. I made my first Holy Communion in Strasbourg. My confirmation I made out in that Winona country, in that St. Bernard's Church.
What would be the meal that you would have for this?
It had to be usually ribble soup. You know what ribble soup is?
No, I don't.
There's little tiny dumplings, you know, you can buy in the store, little tiny in packages. And we call it ribble. That was the main soup. Sometimes I had vegetable soup, real good borscht vegetable soup. That was very delicious. And then the neighbors and friends were invited to come in. And always had a good time.
Would there be kuchen there?
Oh yeah, kuchen and cake, that was a must. And sometimes pies.
Did the neighbors bring things as well?
No, they didn't. No, you furnished everything.
Were you able to have religious conversations with your pastor and ask him about religious teachings?
Never did, but our priest, he made one visit in his entire lifetime to every farm. I remember he came to our farm one time. My dad was just at the still making alcohol. He thought, oh, this is the wrong time, so the priest, no, that's okay. He says, if you like to have a drink or two. And my dad had one drink every day, and he was never a drunkard or anything like that.
Just had the one drink
So,
after
yeah.
working in the field?
And that's the only visit we ever had from the priest in the home, all those years that we were out there.
Did you have Sunday school or any kind of religious teaching?
Yeah, when our 7-month term of school was over with, then we had in Germany called the Kinderlehre, children learning. And the priest came from Krasna to this mission church out in St. Bernard's. We had it for 2 weeks straight every day. And he would teach us the basic religion things that had to be taught.
Was that taught in German?
Yeah, that was in German.
Do you remember when your church shifted from German to English?
Not exactly, but I'd say in about, not much before 1930. Until about 1930 was everything German.
How did your family and the neighbors react?
They didn't like it too well that it was English then, but usually the priest had a German and English sermon. Half the sermon was in German, the other half was in English. So it worked out quite well.
We were discussing the shift from German to English
Right,
for
yeah.
sermons, and the community's reaction. You said that half of it was German.
Then they were happy when that was introduced. Yeah, they were all happy.
Once it was half and half,
Yeah.
they didn't like all the English.
Right. And of course the altar there, the mass was always in Latin. Nobody understood it. Nobody understood it. And finally that went into English. Well, they liked that a little bit better. And the priest finally started facing the audience right before he faced the altar. Although you'd see his back throughout the mass. And after that changed. He faces the people now.
Did he face for all the masses or just the low mass?
All the masses, yeah.
Okay. Did you still have a high mass?
It's yeah. On Sundays it's usually high mass, and weekdays it's what we call low mass.
Okay.
There's a joke along with that. There was this minister. He preached and preached and preached. Finally says to Mrs. Jones in the middle, "Wake up your husband." He says, "You put him to sleep. You wake him up." It's kind of funny thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you kids understand the German mass, the German homily?
Well, yeah, we were raised German, yeah. Oh, yeah, we understood everything in German. In fact, we liked the German sermons
Okay.
better than English. And then gradually when you learn English, then, of course, you like the English sermon also.
Okay. You didn't have the problem with the priest speaking High German?
No. He spoke pretty much the way we spoke it.
Okay. That's different than other areas. That's neat.
Yeah, that High German. My wife and I went to Germany twice to visit our relatives over there, and they spoke the High German. And we could not understand until we told them, speak slowly. When they spoke real slowly, we'd understand. On their TV, everything was German. I didn't understand anything. It was just so different, that High German.
Did you find as you moved from around that there were different dialects of German you encountered, or did all of you in the different areas speak the same?
We all spoke the same. But across the river, in that southern area, Then we called it Persona. I know why they called it Persona. They spoke entirely different German than we did. We were the Blooddeutsch, they called us here, on this side of the river. And over there, Solon and Cannonball, that area, they were the Persona. They talked differently. But we still understood quite well, but it was quite a bit different.
Okay. Do those two terms have a translation in English?
Not really, I guess.
Okay. Just curious.
Like, for example, we say, Komm rein essen. Come on and eat. They would say, Kommen Sie rein zu essen. Kommen Sie rein zu essen. We understood, but it's entirely different ours.
Okay. Did you ever experience death as a child? Of a neighbor, of a friend?
Well, yeah, the first adult I remember, of course, there was no embalming in those days, the early days. There was an old grandpa, then laying in bed with his hands folded, and I stood, what a mystery, what a mystery. He can't talk now. I was in my first grade, so I was probably 6 or 7 years old there. I couldn't get over that. Then later on, babies would die, and there again couldn't figure out, why do they have to die? Why bury him and all those things? It was the mystery of it that got me.
Did you ever talk about it with your brothers and sisters or your parents?
No, it was never discussed.
Let's talk about holidays.
Unless you want to hear another joke on...
Sure.
On it. Well, anyway, years ago, like I said, there was no embalming done. But when the person died, they probably keep him overnight. And the next day they had to bury, otherwise they start going to pieces, So there's this young fella died, put him in a casket, and in his home. The home was about a block from the church, so they carried him to the church. From the church, they carried him to the cemetery. It was also only a block. But anyway, as they carried him to the cemetery, when the pallbearer stumbled, that gave the casket ajar, the poor fellow sat up. He wasn't dead. A year later, he died again. This time his widow walked ahead of the casket, picked up every rock and pebble she could find. Just a joke, of course.
Of course.
She didn't want him to wake up again.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about religion or your church experiences?
Not really, except when I took that religion class when school was out in the spring. This priest came. He was such a strict priest. Father Eichler was his name. And whenever you didn't behave or didn't know what he asked, he'd pull your hair here and give you a slap. And I was always so worried about that. We were just scared to death of that man. I know why he did that, but we really tried to learn whatever he teach us.
Did that ever happen in school? When
No.
you'd walk by and give
No.
you a little nudge?
Not in school, no. They probably put the ruler and had it over your hand or something like that.
Okay.
Like when I went to Strasbourg, I know in my first grade there, one kid was kind of a mean. The sister, there was all sisters teaching there. She had a yardstick. And you always have to hold your hand out. And she hit that real hard. This one kid had his hand out. He put it back and she hit herself on the knee. It was hard. She hurt herself. She really got mad at that kid.
But she kept hitting people with the ruler, didn't she?
Yeah, that was a must.
You didn't go. Did you go to a private?
That was a parochial private school, yes, in Strasbourg.
Just for first grade?
Yeah, just for first.
Okay. What was your favorite holiday as a child?
Christmas. Even though the bugger never gave me any presents, but I wanted to see him. But I always waited for Christmas and never. Except one time I got a monkey that if you pulled the string, it crawled up towards the top. I never forgot that. It was such a thrill. The first toy I ever got in my life, I was probably 8 years old. And that's the only thing Santa Claus ever brought me. Oh, he'd always bring little bags of candy and nuts and so on, but still we always wanted the guy to come, but he never brought us anything.
What did your family do to celebrate Christmas Eve and Christmas? Did you go to Mass?
We went to midnight Mass, and in the wintertime, since we lived out and the river was frozen, we go by with the Model T. If the road was open, we go to Fort Yates. And if there was too much snow, we couldn't drive, then we took the bobsled. We drive over there with the bobsled, take in midnight mass. We never missed it. It was about either 4 or 5 miles from our home.
Did you have a special meal for Christmas?
Well, yeah, not really, except we had probably chicken, noodle soup and stuff like that. Chicken was usually, most Sundays that was a meal anyway. Other than that, was nothing special.
Did you guys sit around playing games for the evening for Christmas, or did you?
No, we didn't. We just sat around and visited. Mm-hmm.
Did you celebrate Easter?
Not that much, except we'd go out and look for those coloured eggs all over the place, and they were just hard-boiled eggs. And the bunny would leave some in our basket. There again, no toys or nothing. And I'd never forget we wanted to see that Easter bunny so bad. And when we lived in Strasbourg, my dad go up to the window. Quick, 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 quick. What? The Easter bunny just went around the corner. We'd run to the window. We felt so bad we didn't. We missed him just by seconds. He'd pull that every year. Come, quick, quick, quick. He just went around the corner. We were so mad that never got to see the bunny.
So your dad had a good sense of humor.
Oh yeah. He never missed that, and he got us every year on that.
Did you guys go to church to celebrate Good Friday?
Oh yeah, those days, yeah, they were musts. Yeah, we always went.
Were there any other holidays that you enjoyed celebrating as a family? Halloween?
Well, the 4th of July, that was Dad could give us only a quarter spending money. But the parade that they had, usually not much of a parade in those days, but we liked to see the parade. And with this quarter, I remember I'd buy a banana, an ice cream cone, 2 purple plums, 15 cents is gone, a bag of Russian peanuts, we called it, sunflower seeds. They were only a nickel. A nickel I had to take home with me. I couldn't spend all that money. I spent 20 cents, a nickel I took home with me. And that was year after year, that was it. The older ones got 50 cents, my brothers, but we younger kids got a quarter. Our poor dad, he just didn't have any more else. He'd have given us more.
Mm-hmm. How did the 30s really affect your family? Did it cause a lot of strain on your family?
Not really a hardship, although, like say, on the farm we had our own eggs, our own chickens, own pork, beef, but all the money we needed was to buy flour and coffee that we bought with the 4 cents a dozen for eggs, and $4 for a 10-gallon can of cream. And that's the way we lived.
Okay. Let's talk about your high school years. Can you tell me about the dances you went to?
In high school, I don't think we went to any dance. No, we didn't go to any dances.
Okay.
The school had no dances, and there was no money I had no money to go to a public dance where they charged. So none of that.
What high school did you go to?
My first 2 years I went to Strasbourg. Then it was St. Benedict's High School. The last 2 years I went to Linton High School. I graduated here in 1936.
And now, since you lived in the country, how did you get to and from school?
I boarded and roomed with families. In Strasbourg, I boarded and roomed with my Aunt Katie Bauman, a saintly woman, a very, very nice lady. She kept me for 2 years. Then Linton, I stayed with 1 year with what they used to be our neighbors, the Morris Richters. I stayed 1 year with them. The other with the Ellen Dyers. They were also neighbors of ours at that time, but they lived in here. And then my dad just gave them a couple dollars a month, cash, and brought in eggs and cream and sugar and meat, chickens, pork, and so on to pay for my board. That's how I got through 4 years. Then when I went to college, there again I went to Minot. I worked for my board, worked in the Langseth's Cafe. Every night I had to peel 100 pounds of potatoes, 100 pounds of potatoes. On weekends, in addition to that, I had to clean and dress a half a dozen chickens for that chicken soup on Sunday. That's how I earned my board while going to college. 100 pounds of potato every night, half a dozen chickens, in addition potatoes every Saturday. So it was rough.
Did you have chores to do around the house when you were boarded in high school?
No, there were no chores. No, in town, there was really nothing to do.
How old were you when you started high school?
I was 14. And there again, to make spending my money, I'll tell you that too. On Saturdays, see, I board room with my Aunt Katie in Straw Street. Saturdays, I'd go out in the fall, pick corn. And I hate corn picking. But $1 a day, I had $1. With that dollar, then the next day I bought myself a Mr. Good bar, still one of my favorite candy bars, a bag of Russian peanuts, which was a sunflower seed for a nickel, package of juicy fruit or spearmint gum, and a bottle of pop. And I still had money left. Other Saturdays I'd go out and pick up cow chips for the widow ladies that made good burning fuel for the stoves. 50 cents a day. And then during the winter time, that made a lot of ashes in their basement. I carry out a couple of tubs full of ashes for those widow ladies, carried out to the back alley. 10 cents for that. It was dirty, filthy work. But it was a dime. That's how I made my spending money. My dad couldn't give me a dime. He had nothing.
Interesting. What was it like transitioning from grade school to high school?
It was hard. See, this country school was all 8 grades in one room. You were buddy. High school, all in one grade. And like I say, most of them knew a little more than I did because they had 9 months of school. All this lifetime, I had only 7. Many things came up, I knew nothing about it, and they knew it. So it was kind of hard, but we made it.
What classes did you take in high school?
It was civics, vocations, psychology, almost everything, history, science, mathematics, all different classes.
Did you have any teachers that you preferred, that you liked in high school?
There were a few of them I liked better, like there was my accountants teacher here in Linton, Miss Ludwig's. She was great. And I used to have problems, and she'd explain it to me until she was blue in the face, until finally I got what it was all about. She was very nice. Jeanette Ludwig was her name.
Did you have a teacher that you didn't really care for?
Not really. There's others I didn't like quite as well as others, but the one in college, she was a Jewish gal, and she taught geography. She always called it geography. She must have thought that her class was the only class we had in the entire semester. She loaded us up with work. It was pitiful. So we complained to the president of the college, and a whole bunch of us failed. So he called her in one day. He said, "You know why those students are all failing? You're not teaching them how to pass their grade. You better perk up, or else you're out of here." And she was, what the heck was her name again? I forgot. Anyway, she was a Jewish gal, and her I didn't like.
What kind of homework would she give you?
Well, it's her geography, just all kinds of stuff we had to write out, make graphs, and keep writing paragraphs and paragraphs of certain things. It was just unbelievable.
In your high school, what was the school population like? Was there more boys than girls?
There were more boys than girls.
Did you have any Native Americans going to school with you at that time, or anybody of a different ethnicity?
Only here lately we had one basketball player. He was a star basketball player. Ambrose Dog Eagle was his name. He was from 48th. He played a couple of years. And then the next year when he graduated, they had another Indian boy come over from 48th. I forget his name, though. Those are the only Native Americans I can remember.
Did you notice that they were treated differently?
They were treated the same. Everybody liked them. They wanted no special favors. But they were good basketball players. That's why Linton wanted them. So we won a lot of games because of them.
What was your favorite memory from high school, or one of your favorite memories?
Probably the graduating. there were, I think, something like 30 of us graduated, being on that stage, cap and gown. And that was the day before my dad died. I was on that stage. And the next day, my dad died, 1936. But that was one of my favorites. I really looked forward to that diploma.
Were you one of the first ones to graduate high school in your family?
The first and only one, yeah. None of the rest have got to. They'd like to go into school too, but my dad said we can't afford it. So they all had to stay in the farm. And I, because of my weakness on doing farm work, got the opportunity to go to high school, and I was the only one.
So do you think your brothers and sisters were a bit jealous of you?
They were, oh yeah, they didn't like it at all.
Did they ever give you a hard time about it?
Once in a while, yeah.
Did you participate in any school activities, basketball, any clubs?
I wasn't good at basketball. I played a little basketball. I played football. I was right guard on the team here in Linton. Was pretty good at that. We became state champions that year. And I was pretty good at class plays. I played Ichabod Crane in one of the class plays. So and then the choir, I sang in the choir and played violin in the orchestra.
Do you have any memories, any experiences you'd like to share that you had in those clubs?
Not really, I guess. It all went pretty smoothly.
If somebody got disciplined at high school, what would their punishment be?
They got called into the superintendent's office, got that rubber hose whacked across the back a few times.
Were you encouraged to go to college after high school?
No, I wanted to go on my own. I wanted to go so badly, but I couldn't afford it. And then here in Linton, this Dr. Mork, a dentist, he was such a nice man. He says, you go up to courthouse, see Mr. Watts, he's head of this NYA, National Youth Administration. He can help you get to college. So I went up and saw him. Sure enough, he arranged that I could go to college in Minot, where the tuition was paid for, boardroom, everything was paid for, except we had to work about 4 hours a day there. They put up a student union there, and next year they put the president's home was built there. So that's how I got through my college. And later on, I worked at this cafe when there was no more aid available otherwise. That's how I got through college.
So you helped build the union and the president's
The student
house?
union and the president's house.
Were there a lot of you that?
Yeah, there were probably 40 or 50 of us boys.
What kind of guidance were you given on how to
They had,
do this?
Mr. Hansen was the manager of the thing. And a lot of the boys, they would skip out. You had no way to keep track of 60 guys. They'd just show up and he'd put their name down and they'd be gone. A few of us stayed. We showed us how to nail this board and how to saw that board. And there were some master people there too, you know. They had to have masters, master electricians, master plumbers. In fact, I worked with the master plumber for a while on that. So there was a well-built home with all that NYA help.
Is there anything else about high school that you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
Well, you mentioned that you did get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
What year did you get drafted?
In 1942,
And you had
September.
just finished college?
No, I hadn't finished. I had 1 quarter left. I did go they let me go that summer quarter yet, though, in Minot, and then I had to go to the Army from 42 till 1946. In February 46, I got out just in time to get in on the spring quarter. Spring and summer quarters, I graduated 46 then out of Minot with my Bachelor of Science degree in education. So it worked out pretty nicely for me that way. And of course the government helped with my education, board and room and all of that.
Can you tell me about your service? Where you're stationed, what your job was?
Well, my first 27 months, I was lucky. I was like a soldier in uniform at Fort Snelling, Minneapolis. I was a chaplain's assistant. And I didn't know any of those Latin prayers and so on, so he gave me some cards. I had to study the Latin words so I could serve Mass with him. I was also his clerk when it came to military dispensations for veterans. I mean, for service, when I had to make out those papers, send them to Baltimore, Maryland, get them approved. Whenever there was to be a wedding, the night before the wedding, that was in our post chapel there, I had to rehearse it for them, just like I was the priest. Do this and do that and do that. Then they'd also invite me to their wedding also. Sometimes I was even the best man at a wedding. That was fun. I was also the chaplain's chauffeur. He didn't dare drive a car. I loved that. So one day, he was a lieutenant colonel. I said, Father Troy, how come you don't drive? He said, check my police record downtown. You know why I don't drive. He must have had a bad driving record, and they wouldn't let him drive. So that made me happy. I drove him all over. That was fun, driving that car. It was always a good car. There was service for him and everything. And I was also the chaplain assistant for other chaplains. There were 3 chaplains, there, 2 Protestant ones, so I had to do some of their errands and some of their book work also, along with this Catholic chaplain.
And is this for the Army?
Yeah, that was while I was in the Army. So I was there 27 months. Like I say, it was like being in the Army, like a soldier in uniform, out of uniform. So then I was shipped to Camp Gordon Johnson, Florida. There was a little island out in the Gulf of Mexico. It was not too far from Tallahassee. There was nothing but sand there. You'd go out on drills, you'd take one side forward and slide 3 back. It was sort of like a hellhole, but we had pretty good food there, though. And the toilets were all outside. There was no inside plumbing. They had makeshift electricity. It was bad. So I was there only 3 months. I was lucky. Then I applied to become a medic. So they sent me to medical school in San Antonio, Texas. I just loved it there. Took my training at Brooke General Hospital in San Antonio. That lasted 3 months. Learned how to give tracheotomies and how to administer drugs and so on. Then I was transferred to Fort Mason, California. I was there only a month. The war was already over with at that time, but they shipped us overseas anyway to the Philippine Islands. And on our way over there, we stopped at Honolulu for a couple of days. We went swimming in Waikiki Beach. That was in February at that time. That was just a lot of fun. But I got terribly seasick on that ship. Couldn't help it. So I got that little memory, whatever you call it, from going over the equator or whatever it was.
Domain of the Golden Dragon.
So anyway, then we got over there. First we were in Manila for a little while. And then they put us across the bay to Maravillas, Bataan. That's where I spent all the time till I came home and got discharged. Well, I said, over there, while I was over there, my son and my brother and I met one time in Manila, had a nice visit. He was with another outfit over in the other island.
Did you have a couple brothers get drafted?
No, just the one.
Just one?
Yeah.
Okay. How did the war affect your family, your parents on the farm?
Well, outside of being hurt by having me go to service, not knowing what's going to happen to me, everything went fine. They didn't miss me too much. Otherwise, as far as work and labor and chores concerned, they got along fine without me.
Did rationing have a big impact on them at all?
Oh, yes, yeah. Sugar was rationed and many other things were rationed, yeah. Tires for cars were rationed. And yeah, they had rough going there.
Let's go back a little to the 30s. Did anybody in your family ever work for the WPA? Or any of the New Deal?
I think one of my brothers did one time for a while. And I, of course, while I went to school, was with the NYA, National Youth Administration.
Okay. Do you remember Pearl Harbor when it got attacked?
Oh, yes.
About that?
We were worried right away. Figuring now what's going to happen.
Did you hear about it on the radio?
Yeah, on radio. I was in college at Minot at that time.
Can you tell me your reactions where you were?
Well, most of it, we said to each other right there, buddy, you're going into service now. We knew it's going to be it for us. And we did.
Well, and you had mentioned that the war affected you because you changed.
Yeah, I changed from wanting to be a school teacher to becoming a mortician.
Did it have any other impacts on you?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
Except we went, I might mention this, while on Mary Vale's Baton, the island of Corregidor was only a couple of miles from there. So occasionally we'd go to Corregidor, and one Sunday morning the priest took me on his boat. I was his mass servant to have mass there. One other time, a bunch of us over there, and here a bunch of Japs crawled out of a hole. The war was over for several months already. They came to surrender. And one of them could speak English quite well. Had a newspaper in his hand. From Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the war is over. He could read that. That's why they came out of that whole surrender. He said, the war must be over. This is a newspaper. To America, the good Lord, I guess, blew this newspaper on their island, let them pick it up. So we asked how they survived all these months, because they had nothing from Japan, and being several months without. We dug roots out of plants, roots, wild roots, flowers, whatever we could have. That's what we survived on, they said. And of course, they were happy. The war was over with. They got to go home then. Yeah, that was quite an experience.
Did any of this did you get involved in politics with the war breaking out?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Let's pause and shift and do some pictures for a little bit. Okay, could you explain what the tape is?
This tape you're about to hear was made by Mary Coker and Peter A. Kraft of Linton, North Dakota, on December 8th, 1992. It'll be mostly German hymns and songs. We're about ready to start playing them. When David drew near in Liebe on Friday, all him reached here. Maria, du milde, du siehst Jungfrau, nimm auf meine Liebe, so wie ich vertrau. Du bist ja die Mutter, dein Kind will ich sein, in Leben und Sterben, mir einzig allein. Du bist ja die Mutter, dein Kind will ich sein, in Leben und Sterben, dir einzig allein. Gib, dass ich von Herzen dich liebe und preis. Gib, dass ich viel Zeichen der Liebe erweis. Gib, dass mich nicht scheide, nicht Unglück noch Leid, treu dir zu dienen, in Glück und in Freud. Gib, dass mich nicht scheide, nicht Unglück noch Leid, treu dir zu dienen, in Glück und in Freud. Auch hatte ich Herzen nur 1000-mal mehr, mir 1000 zu geben, das ist mein Begehr. So oft mein Herz klopft, befehl ich es dir. So oft ich nur atme, verbind ich dich mir. So oft mein Herz klopft, befehl ich es dir. So oft ich nur atme, verbind ich dich mir.
So what?
keinen verschonen. Der Tod verfolgt Zepter und Kronen. Eitel, eitel ist zeitliches Glück. Alles, alles fällt wieder zurück, fällt wieder zurück. Der Leib von der Erde genommen, kehrt dorthin, woher er gekommen. Reichtum, Schönheit, bis glänzende Macht, alles decket die ewige Nacht, die ewige Nacht. Was weinet ihr Freunde und Brüder? Wir sehen einander ja wieder. An dem Tage das jüngste Gericht fürchtet Gott nur und fürchtet sonst nicht, und fürchtet sonst nicht. Die Tränen sind Zeichen der Liebe, doch sind sie natürliche Triebe. Nur um eines bitt ich, betet täglich, auch betet für mich, auch betet für mich. Schlaf in himmlischer Ruhe, schlaf in himmlischer Ruhe, stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, irrtümlich, Gemach, durch der Engel, Halleluja, kennt es laut von fern und nah. Christ der Ritter ist da, Christ der Ritter ist da. Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, Gottes Sohn, oh wie lang, lieb aus deinem göttlichen Mund, da uns schlägt die rettende Stund, Licht in deiner Geburt, Licht in deiner Geburt. Wie die Blümlein draußen zwitschern, in der Abendluft der Wind, und du willst mir Herz erbieten, und du willst von mir nun gehen. Oh, bleib bei mir und geh nicht fort. Mein Herz ist ja dein Heimatort. Oh, bleib bei mir und geh nicht fort. Mein Herz ist ja dein Heimatort. Geliebte dich ohne Ende, hab dir nie was Leids getan, und du drückst mir stumm die Hände, und du fangst zu weinen an. Oh, weine nicht und geh nicht fort, in meinem Herzen ist der schönste Ort. Oh, weine nicht und geh nicht fort, in meinem Herzen ist der schönste Ort. In der Ferne sind die Menschen nicht so gut, und ich kämpfe dich so gerne, all mein Leben und mein Blut. Oh, bleib bei mir und geh nicht fort, in meinem Herzen ist der schönste Ort. Oh, bleib bei mir und geh nicht fort, in meinem Herzen ist der schönste Ort.
leben, auch wenn es nur immer so blieb. Wir heitern einander das Leben, auch wenn es nur immer so blieb. Es kann ja nicht immer so bleiben, hier unter dem Wechsel des Mondes. Der Krieg muss den Frieden vertreiben. Im Krieg, da wird keiner verschont. Der Krieg muss den Frieden vertreiben. Im Krieg, da wird keiner verschont. Da kommen die stolzen Franzosen daher, und wir Deutschen, wir fürchten sie nicht. Wir stehen da so fest wie die Mauer und weichen kein Finkesfrei zurück. Wir stehen da so fest wie die Mauer und weichen kein Finkesfrei zurück. Und hätten wir niemals ans Russland gedacht, so hätten wir Frieden in Deutschland gemacht. Willst du halt Kaiser geblieben und willst auf deinem schönsten Thron, dann wirst du halt Kaiser geblieben und wirst auf deinem schönsten Thron. Oh Napoleon, du schust es gesellig, du sitzt so fest auf deinem Thron. In Deutschland regierst du so streng, in Russland bekommst du deinen Lohn. In Deutschland regierst du so streng, in Russland bekommst du deinen Lohn.
Well, we're going to sing my favorite hymn yet, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. Okay, Pete, is there anything to say?
Yes, we'll all join in on this. We'll have Pius, the pianist, join in. We'll have his wife, Katie, join in with us. John Cover will help, Mary Cover, myself, Pete Kraft. And since Katie was so good, made about 3 pots of coffee this evening, our voices should be getting better by the hour. Of course, we can't forget that 190 proof,
We had that too.
that Hochzeit schnapps we had.
Yeah,
That
and I think that,
livened us all up a little bit.
yeah.
So we're going to wind this up now on the evening of December 12th, 1992. So we'll let Pius take it away. Take it away, Pius.
What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry. Every
Could you tell me a little bit about some of those songs that were on the tape? You said one was a sad song. Is that for funerals?
Yes, that one thing, it's called the Schicksallied, that was always sung at the graveside at every German funeral. And even nowadays you still hear it once in a while. It's like the deceased, the dead one talking to you. Say, don't weep over me. Pray for me that you may also be in heaven with me someday. That's the interpretation of it. Some of the other songs most of you will recognize. I learned them mostly from my father. He was quite a singer. He sang in all the church choirs as well as did I. So that's where I learned a lot of those songs. And Mary Coher, she sang with me. She provided the words for those songs. We actually read them as we were singing. That was in December of 1992. And Pius Kelch, it was in Pius Kelch's house. Pius was the pianist.
Did you sing these songs at home as well as at church, or did you guys just?
Yes, at home and some of them in church once in a while.
Okay. I noticed a couple more Christmas carols.
Right, yeah.
I could recognize a few of those.
They, of course, were sung in church, yeah.
Okay, interesting. In discussing funerals, I kind of want to talk about the health care, what it was like when you were a kid. You know, what was available to you if you were sick? What did you have to do?
When you were sick, well, there were a few doctors around. Of course, being way out, my family was 25 miles out of town. Fortunately, we never needed a doctor real badly, but had we needed one real badly, well, my mother did one time. Her varicose veins broke. There was blood all over the floor till she noticed it. And then we wrapped her and brought her to town to go over down to come in here, and the doctor then took care of it. But it was bad when there was emergencies. You couldn't hardly take care of them right away.
Were any of your neighbors seriously injured?
Yeah, one boy had they had sort of a swing outside with a heavy plow wheel to go round and round. And somehow or other, the guy was pulling this wheel, let it go, and the neighbor boy, he was probably 10 years old, he landed right in the middle of his head, so smashed the skull way in. And then rushed him by car to Linton here, then on to Bismarck, and he spent about a month in the hospital in Bismarck. Fortunately, he came out of it okay, though, but those are the bad things when you're that far from home.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any home remedies for when you were feeling sick?
Oh, yeah, there was green drops. That was a great healer. Green drops. You can still buy them in drugstore. You put them into a few drops into a glass of water and you drink them. And they were good for almost anything and everything. Liniment, the red liniment and the white liniment, that was always a must. Different kinds of salves, carbo salves and vessel and rosebud salves. They all helped when you were hurt and needed attention.
Did you have something if you had a headache, or what would you use if you were feeling, maybe had a cold coming on? What would be a typical remedy?
Have you ever Camilla tea? Mm-hmm. Camilla tea. That was always a going thing. Everybody had Camilla tea, and for headaches and stuff like stuffed up, that always seemed to help. We always had that in our house.
Did you just pick it up at the store? Did the local?
No, we grew it. It grew wild. It's a perennial plant. It just keeps growing and growing on its own. And then you just harvest and let it dry out, and then in the winter time you used it, just like tea.
Okay. So every family kind of had.
Yeah, they all had that. Somewhere. Yeah. And if you had real bad sore throat, my parents anyway, they made a string liniment. That regular liniment, maybe a teaspoonful in a glass full of water. You drink that, and that kind of disinfected the throat and so on. That was another remedy.
Did you put anything on, say, cuts if they were bleeding?
There too, just from that iodine. We put iodine on. That usually killed the bacteria. Then put a bandage over it. It was bad enough. That usually took care of it.
Okay. During your childhood, did you ever see a dentist, an eye doctor, or go to a doctor?
Not as a child, but after I was grown up, while I was teaching school already, I slept with a guy. We had to share that bed, and he had trachoma in his right eye. And I got that trachoma. It was infectious, and I didn't know it. So I had to take treatment for 18 months. I had to make trips, regular trips to Bismarck to a Dr. Diven. He treated about once every 2 or 3 weeks. I had to come up to see him. He treated it. And got rid of it. It left it weak, but it healed up nicely. It was trachoma.
Okay. With your background working in a funeral home, what were funerals like growing up as compared to when you started being a mortician?
Well, if I sold a funeral for $300 or $400 at that time, that was a nice funeral. Now for that same funeral, they get $4,000 or $5,000. And a lot of times nowadays they sell a lot of funerals for $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. People have the money now. At that time I was during poor times, so I made no money, but I did manage to get my wife and 8 children through college and everything. I made enough for that, but other than that, there's very little I could save. Not on $400 or $500 per funeral, you know. That included the casket, the embalming, the use of funeral home, cemetery equipment, hearse service, getting all the paperwork done, everything. And the county paid me only $50 when I had a county bear, and there were quite a few of them. The county paid for about $50. Well, how much can you make on $50 on a funeral, hearse service, and everything?
And that was
It was rough.
early 1950s?
Yeah, 47 to 1960 maybe. And then things got better.
What were the caskets like when you were a kid as opposed to in the 1950s?
When I was when we still lived in Stars, we had my godfather's wife. He and his wife made coffins, they called them, all different sizes. Whenever anybody died, they went to Mr. Matthias Moser. He sold them a casket for $20, $25 for the casket. Took it home. They dressed the body, laid it in there. Like I said, the next day you had to bury, otherwise it would go to pieces. So for quite a few years, he provided the coffins for all the people. In fact, when I was in the room, he had one made for his wife. When she died, I had to use the coffin he made for her. It was a homemade. It was lined with oilcloth and so on, black coffin.
What were funerals themselves like? What was the service like?
Well, the Catholics, they had their regular funeral mass, and especially in Strasbourg, Hague, not Lindt, but Strasbourg and Hague. I was the German Catholic, so I'd say lead the rosary from the home. They were always in the home, you know, overnight, and the people would follow, lead the rosary up to the church. After Mass from the church to the cemetery, I again would lead the rosary out live, so that they're all here, they'd respond. That went on for years. We did that in Strasbourg and Hague. Cemetery was close by.
Was it similar when you were a kid? Did somebody?
Yeah. Then too, they had. Yeah, that's where I picked up the idea, and people liked that. See, instead of gossiping and laughing and joking on the way to the cemetery, let's be reverent and pray. So I did that for many years, and they liked that. In fact, I have a German rosary on tape here, a German that I said at the funeral home. People responded. It's all in German, you know. To begin with, they were always German.
I suppose you did.
So they taped one for me.
Yeah. Who would get the gravesite ready?
Usually the families. I'd give them the dimensions of the grave, and they usually neighbors did the grave digging for nothing. They took those dimensions, grave, and most of them were buried with just a rough box, you know, and then the casket was put in that rough box with very little protection. In a couple of years, the box would cave down, and the casket and the grave would sink, and that was it. Now, my son, when he was killed in Vietnam, I put him into a sealer casket and a sealed vault. And that was 36 years ago. And I could take him out there right now, look at him. He'd still be just the day I put him in there. There'd be no change. They stay like pickles in a jar. No bacteria gets up in there to chew up the body. So every time I visit this grave, I know he's down there just the way I laid him there 36 years ago. That's what vaults will do.
Interesting. What was a rough box made out of?
Just a pine wood, just ordinary pine wood, and the casket was put into that. Gave a little bit of protection, not all that dirt and everything going in the casket itself. But then after a while, it soon caved in, and that was it.
When you were young, what kind of mourning was there after a funeral?
Still a lot of crying. They did a lot of crying, maybe for several days. That probably lasted. Other than that, there was no counseling or anything for anybody. They just had to get over it on their own. I know from my mother, when Dad died, she for a whole month she cried every day and every night. She cried and cried. And when my wife died, I did a little crying too, but I was hurting some, but I didn't do much crying. And nowadays you see very, very little of that anymore. But years ago, everybody cried and cried.
Did people talk about the funeral after it happened? Did they talk about the person who just died? And
Oh yeah, we still do nowadays. That's usually a wake service the night before the funeral at the funeral home, or if it's at their home, then everybody says a few things about this deceased one, comical or serious or whatever. They still do that all the time. And tributes. In fact, this last Emmons County record came out a couple of days ago. I've got a tribute in to this Leroy Huber that died. I knew him so well. That's a nice kid. Real nice tribute I wrote up and they have it printed in the Emmons County Record this week.
okay.
Well, like I said, many people seem to think that the funeral director, which I was for some 33 years, they seem to think they're millionaires. They make a lot of money. I can tell you one case. I buried a mother. She had 15 kids. To this day, the funeral bill has not been paid. And I wrote them letters, asked them for the money. They wouldn't send it. The last letter I finally wrote them, I says, your mother would turn over in her grave if she knew you didn't pay her bill, but that's up to you. You just won't pay. Why you won't pay, I can't figure out. So that was one.
How much was the funeral?
About $400. Would have been, what, $30, $40 per kid? They wouldn't pay. Then what was that other one?
You said you had two of your pupils drowned.
Oh, yeah.
And you had,
Two of my pupils that I taught in a country school out at Winona country school. They were either 4th or 5th grade when I taught them. A few years later, they went swimming at Welk Dams west of Strasbourg. And one of them jumped in there, sort of a diving board. And the other one says, hey, Johnny is driving. Is drowning. I'm going to jump in and save him. Neither one could swim. So Johnny and Eugene both went down and both drowned. Took them out, I had to embalm and take care of their funerals. Very sad funerals, two of my pupils.
they were your pupils, but
They
how
were.
old were they when they drowned?
And when they drowned, they were probably 15, 16, I would think. They're still
kids.
young boys, yeah.
Still just kids.
Yeah, it was very sad.
Is there anything else you'd like to share from your experience as being a funeral director? And how they compare between when you were a funeral director as opposed to when you were a kid?
Well, the methods of embalming are still pretty much the same and so on. But price-wise, like I say, if I sold a funeral for $400 or $500, that was a big funeral. I stuck my chest out. I was proud. And now the funerals are 6, 7, 8, 9,000. Quite a bit difference. And of course, I sold mostly wooden caskets, cloth-covered caskets. Once in a while, I sold a steel casket. Nowadays, pretty all of them are steel and bronze and copper that they sell. They're naturally higher priced. But there's a big difference between a $400 funeral and an $8,000 or $9,000 funeral, if you want to compare them two.
Embalming methods were around when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Just people couldn't afford them, or they were done?
They just weren't done. I don't know, they just didn't. To go way back, there weren't even any embalmers. Of course, in my time when I was a young boy, there was an embalmer here in town. In fact, when my dad died out on the farm, the embalmer came right out and embalmed him right at our home. And then he came back home, and we dressed him then after the embalming, laid him in the casket. We did all of that ourselves. Then hauled him to Strasbourg with our truck. There was hardly no service by a funeral director at that time. Now they have hearses, you know, and limousines and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, why don't we switch gears to a very different topic, about weddings. Can you tell me about what weddings were like growing up?
They were, I took in a few of them with my parents. If we kids were lucky, we were invited to come along. And of course, the church wedding was pretty much like nowadays. There was organ music, and there was a regular mass. I'm thinking of a Catholic wedding now. Then they go to the bride's home. That's where the celebrating started. And as you came to the home, there was a fellow standing there, or a lady, with red eye. That's whiskey, the homemade brew, and doctored up with different kinds of flavors. And everybody got a little jigger full of that, and you had to swallow it. Then you entered. Then there was some more beer, a lot of times homemade beer. There was all kind of goodies, kuchen, cake, pie, and so on. You help yourself until the real meal came. That was always soup, usually a noodle soup or knifle soup or something like that, chicken soup. That was always very delicious. And they had a lot of guests, and all that time the accordion player, he was only an accordion player, he played the accordion. And while they were at the table, the waiters went around with 2 plates. You've probably seen that on TV already. They wrap those plates, go up and down the line to collect tips for the first round was for the cooks. You could throw in your nickel or your dime. That's about all you had in those days. They probably ended up with maybe $3, $4. The cooks got that. Then they made another round while everybody was sitting there eating, rattling those soup plates, rattle, you threw in your nickels and dimes, and that was for the accordion player. Or once in a while the accordion player had maybe a clarinetist with him, like my dad played clarinet. That money went to them, and that's all the pay they got. And I was dancing all afternoon, and sometimes till morning. That went on and on. The next day, a lot of times there was celebration all day. And once in a while, even into a third day, but usually the second day they went home. That was it.
Were there any traditions the same as there are now? Was there a money dance for the bride and groom?
Yeah, the bridal dance, yeah. They always had that. You pay $1 and you get to dance with the bride. And to go way back still further, they had a tradition of taking a couple of plates. I don't know why they did that. Throw them on the floor, crush them. To this day, I don't know why they did that, but a couple of women took 2 or 3 of those soup plates, threw them on the floor, crushed them, stepped on them. They were 2 little pieces. That is supposed to give a sign of don't let their wedding fall apart like that, or maybe it meant that, I don't know. But that was done at a lot of weddings.
What kind of foods were served at your wedding?
We had chicken, mainly chicken and soup, rivel soup.
Was it a sit-down dinner?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
All the food out?
Yeah, then the waiters brought it to us. And it was right at the home, at my wife's home, so there weren't too many people there.
Were you able to have a honeymoon?
No. I was teaching school at the time, but we did have a wedding dance in Strasbourg, though. There was a free wedding dance for anybody that wanted to come. And then the next day, I went to my school and taught school. That was the honeymoon.
To kind of conclude, wrap up this interview, why do you think it's important to tell your life story?
Well, I think it'd be interesting, especially my family, so they know what things were like in my days as I grew up, how things have progressed and got better, like from no radio or TV to radio and TV. We had now telephone. We had no telephone at that time. No computers. All that stuff wasn't there. That's all different, and which is much nicer nowadays than what we had.
Are there any other thoughts or observations that you'd like to share?
I don't believe so. Except it was hard work in those days. We all had to, everybody on the farm especially, had their chores. They had to work hard to keep the thing going.
Do you think you worked harder than people often do now?
Oh yes. And we kids, we got to go to town only maybe twice a year, once on the 4th of July. That was always a must. And one other time we got to go with our parents, come to town. That was always a thrill and lots of fun. We got a bottle of pop, maybe a candy bar at that time.
Interesting. Do you have any questions? Is there anybody else that you could suggest for us to interview?
Only offhand, let's see once. A few of the old timers, they all died within the last year or two. Well, there's still one old timer, but I think he had been viewed. He was on your program one. Paul Welder. You recall that name?
I'm going to go visit him on Monday again.
He's 94, I believe. He and I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas here a couple of years ago, taking those mineral baths. They do wonders for you. Yeah, we felt so good after those baths. We spent a week down there in Hot Springs.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I want to go again this year, and he said, he doesn't feel like going this year. Because they didn't, like I had arthritis down here. That was 10 years ago. Took those baths and left me, haven't felt a thing since. Took my, in some cases, it's even cured cancer already. And they have them right in the hotel where you stay. You just put on your house coat, go downstairs, take your bath, your massage, and go up and get dressed. We did that for a week, and they say you should really stay 2 or 3 weeks to really get cured. But even that 1 week did us a lot of good. So I want to go again, but he doesn't want to go in. Maybe because of his age. Of course, I'm old too. I'm going to be 89 next week. It's getting a little harder to travel.
You're still doing well with it, though.
Other than that, offhand, I don't know who you could interview.
If we have any follow-up questions, would you mind being interviewed again?
No, that's okay. Anytime.
Well, thank you for your time then.
You're welcome.
Go ahead and